The settlers of EdenusV believed they had found heaven, a pristine, untouched world, painted in endless hues of twilight, with no storms, no predators, and an abundance of natural resources. It was as if the universe had crafted this planet specifically for humanity's second chance. When they first arrived, the colonists joked that even the air smelled like hope, crisp and faintly sweet. They built their homes with enthusiasm, using shimmering alloys and glass-like materials that reflected the ever-dusk of the planet's sky. Crops thrived in the rich soil, and the rivers ran with water so pure it shimmered with a faint iridescence. They thought they'd found paradise. But EdenusV had secrets. It began with a discovery deep in the northern valleys. The valleys were known for their dense forests of black, spindly trees that twisted like arthritic fingers toward the heavens. Beneath this canopy, the exploration team stumbled across a city, or what remained of it. The buildings were unlike anything they'd ever seen. Jagged towers jutted at impossible angles, defying the laws of physics. The material wasn't stone, metal, or glass. It was something else entirely, something that shimmered and shifted like liquid under the light. Glyphs adorned every surface, intricate patterns that seemed to ripple and pulse as if alive. The air in the city was heavy, oppressive. It carried a faint hum, almost imperceptible but always there, vibrating in the bones of anyone who dared linger. Dr. Elias Grayson, the lead archaeologist, was the first to notice the mask. It wasn't hidden. It sat in the open, on a pedestal at the center of a vast, circular chamber deep beneath the city. The chamber's walls were adorned with carvings, grotesque, twisting figures that seemed to writhe under the flickering torchlight. Some figures were human-like, others alien, their faces contorted in expressions of agony or ecstasy. And there, in the center of it all, was the mask. It was simple, almost elegant in its design. Smooth, featureless, and black, like a void that swallowed light. But its surface wasn't truly black. When tilted, colors rippled across it, as if the mask was alive, watching. "What do you think it is?" asked Lena Ramirez, the team's head of security, her voice tight with unease. Dr. Grayson didn't answer. He was already reaching for it. They brought it back to the settlement. For weeks, the mask sat untouched in the central research hub, locked in a containment unit under constant observation. Scientists ran every test imaginable, but the mask defied explanation. "It's inert," said Dr. Marina Orloff during one of the many colony-wide broadcasts meant to reassure everyone. "No radiation, no harmful substances. It's just an artifact, a remnant of whatever civilization was here before us." But not everyone was convinced. Colonists who worked near the mask reported strange experiences. Whispers in the dead of night, dreams of shadowy figures standing at the foot of their beds, feelings of being watched even when alone. Jake Torrance, one of the engineers tasked with maintaining the research facility, joked about it to his crewmates. "Maybe it's haunted," he laughed over dinner one evening. "Or maybe it's just messing with us. Who knows what alien ghosts are like?" No one laughed. At first, no one connected Nina Carter's death to the mask. On paper, it was an isolated tragedy, an overworked biochemist pushing herself too far. But the truth of her final moments, captured in the sterile, flickering light of the research lab's surveillance cameras, told a story too bizarre to be dismissed. Nina had been working late again, as she often did. The footage showed her alone, the lab silent except for the occasional hiss of machinery. For hours, she sat in front of the mask's containment unit, staring at it as if in a trance. Her lips moved, but no sound escaped at first. Then, suddenly, her voice broke through the static-filled recording. "I didn't mean to kill him," she whispered. "It was an accident. He shouldn't have been there." Her words came in fragments, her tone alternating between pleading and panicked. She began to sob, her hands clutching at her chest as if she were physically in pain. "I'm sorry," she cried. "Please stop. I didn't mean to." Her cries turned to screams. Without warning, she lunged forward, pressing her hands to the glass of the containment unit. Her fingers scraped and clawed at the surface as if trying to get inside. Blood smeared across the glass, her nails cracking and breaking under the pressure. When the security team arrived, they found Nina slumped on the floor, her face a ruin of torn flesh and gouged eyes. The mask remained where it had been, untouched and featureless, as though mocking them with its stillness. Nina's death was a harbinger of what was to come. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Colonists reported hearing faint voices at the edges of their hearing, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. They dismissed it as the wind or the hum of machinery. But the whispers grew louder. One by one, people started behaving strangely. Sarah Huang, the settlement's teacher, became withdrawn, her once bright demeanor replaced by a haunted look. Her colleagues noticed her mumbling to herself during lessons, words that didn't seem meant for her students. One evening, during a routine dinner party, Sarah stood suddenly and plunged a carving knife into her husband's chest. Again, and again, and again. "He's been lying to me," she sobbed as the blood pooled around her feet. "I know what he did. He thought I wouldn't find out, but I know." The others at the table froze in horror, unable to process the violence unfolding before them. Sarah dropped the knife and turned to them, her face twisted with anguish. "It's his fault. It's all his fault. Do you see now? Do you see?" She collapsed into incoherent wails, rocking back and forth on her knees until security arrived to take her away. Days later, Victor Cole, a botanist, was found in the colony's greenhouse. He had hanged himself from one of the support beams, his body swaying gently among the thriving alien plants. In the dirt below him, he had scrawled a single message with a trembling hand: "The mask sees." As the incidents multiplied, so too did the paranoia. People began accusing one another of harboring secrets, of conspiring, of lying. The whispers didn't just speak, they knew. They dredged up every buried guilt, every unspoken regret, every hidden shame. Marriages dissolved. Lifelong friendships crumbled. People turned inward, consumed by fear that their darkest truths might be exposed. In the streets, once bustling with laughter and camaraderie, silence reigned. Colonists hurried past one another, avoiding eye contact, flinching at imagined accusations. The whispers spared no one. Dr. Elias Grayson, who had been so eager to bring the mask to the colony, became its most devoted observer. He spent countless hours in the lab, poring over recordings, sketches, and alien glyphs recovered from the ruins. His obsession with the artifact grew more fevered with each passing day. To those who dared approach him, he spoke in cryptic fragments. "It's not just a relic," he muttered one evening to a junior researcher. "It's alive. It's watching us. It understands us." Grayson's journals, recovered much later, revealed the depth of his spiraling madness. He believed the mask was not an object, but an entity, a living, sentient force that fed on guilt and shame. "It's a mirror," he wrote in one entry, his handwriting jagged and uneven, "not of the face, but of the soul. It reveals the truths we hide even from ourselves, the truths we cannot bear." As the colony unraveled around him, Grayson became a hermit, locked away in the lab with the mask. Those who saw him during those final days claimed he barely resembled the man he once was. His eyes hollow, his skin pale, his words a jumble of incoherent ramblings. One fateful night, Grayson emerged from the lab, clutching the mask in his hands. He called for a gathering in the settlement square, his voice carrying a manic energy that sent shivers through those who heard it. Under the flickering lights of the colony, he addressed the remaining survivors. His gaunt frame and wild eyes made him look more like a specter than a man. "It's not just a mask," he declared, holding it high for all to see. The crowd recoiled as if the artifact itself exuded malice. "It's a doorway," Grayson continued, his voice rising with feverish intensity. "It doesn't just reveal our truths, it devours them. It feasts on the lies we live and the guilt we bury. The civilization that came before us, they didn't vanish. They destroyed themselves because of this, because of what it showed them." The crowd erupted into chaos. Some screamed, Others wept openly. A few fell to their knees, begging Grayson to destroy it. But Grayson only laughed. A high, broken sound. Destroy it? You can't destroy the truth. You can't outrun it. It's here, inside us, inside everything we've ever done. The night the settlement fell is not a tale of slow decay. It was abrupt, brutal, like a dam bursting, releasing the tidal wave of fear, anger, and madness that had been building in silence. It began with screams, a single voice, shrill and frantic, echoing through the central square. Survivors later speculated it might have been someone seeing the mask in their dreams, or perhaps one of the whispers finally becoming too much. Whatever it was, that scream set the colony ablaze. Not with fire at first, but with paranoia and rage. People poured from their homes, clutching weapons, accusing one another of imagined betrayals. "You knew, didn't you?" someone shouted in the chaos. "You brought it here," another voice shrieked. "You've been lying to us all along." Fists turned to knives and knives to bullets. Blood splattered across the settlement walls. One witness, a young technician named Ava, locked herself inside the hydroponics dome. She watched through a fogged glass window as her neighbors tore each other apart. She would later describe it as a frenzy without purpose, like wild animals in a feeding frenzy. She saw two men fighting over a torch, neither realizing they were already on fire, their screams blending into the cacophony of others. Some colonists fled to the research lab, hoping to destroy the mask once and for all. But when they arrived, they found the room empty. Grayson was gone, and the mask? It sat on the floor, glowing faintly, as if it had been waiting for them. One of the survivors, a medic named Hal, approached it cautiously. "We should just leave it," he muttered. But as he drew nearer, his body seized. His hands stretched out involuntarily, his fingers trembling as they touched the surface of the mask. The others watched in horror as Hal fell to his knees, his eyes rolling back into his head. He began to speak, at first in broken fragments, then in a clear, monotone voice that wasn't his own. "They thought they could escape their sins," he said, his voice alien and hollow. "They thought they could leave their shadows behind. But there is no escape, no hiding." Hal's body convulsed violently before he collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. The mask was no longer glowing. It was now utterly dark, as if it had swallowed the light around it. It was the final straw. Those who witnessed it turned on each other in blind terror, convinced the mask had corrupted everyone around them. By morning, the colony was unrecognizable, a graveyard shrouded in ash and silence. By dawn, EdenusV was quiet again. Fires smoldered in the distance, sending tendrils of black smoke curling into the sky. The settlement was a ruin, its walls pocked with bullet holes and scorched by fire. The bodies were everywhere. They lay sprawled in streets that had once echoed with laughter, their faces frozen in masks of agony and rage. Tools of murder, knives, crowbars, even improvised clubs, lay discarded beside their victims. Amid the carnage, the research lab stood eerily untouched. Inside, the mask was gone. Grayson was gone. No signs of a struggle. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. In the days that followed, a small group of survivors emerged from hiding. They had holed up in basements and supply rooms, their minds fractured by what they'd witnessed. They spoke in hushed tones about the mask, their voices trembling. "It wasn't just showing us who we were," whispered Ava, her eyes darting toward shadows as she spoke. "It was feeding on it. Every scream, every secret, it was growing stronger." Months later, a recovery team from Earth arrived, responding to the automated distress signal that had been broadcasting since the colony fell silent. What they found defied explanation. The once thriving settlement was overgrown with alien vegetation. The structures, crafted to last centuries, were covered in creeping vines that glowed faintly in the twilight. The air was thick with the stench of decay. The team found no living colonists, only bodies, decomposed and twisted in grotesque positions. Their expressions, even in death, seemed to whisper of horrors that refused to fade. The colony's logs painted a fragmented picture, Panicked confessions, desperate screams, and one recurring phrase that appeared over and over, as if carved into the very fabric of their last days. It knows. The mask itself was gone. No trace of it remained. Not in the lab, not in the ruins, not in the surrounding forests. Some of the recovery team whispered among themselves, wondering if it had simply vanished, or if it had been taken. The final transmission, found buried deep in the colony's corrupted database, was a single, chilling audio recording. It was Grayson's voice, distant and distorted, as though coming from another place entirely. "They couldn't bear the truth," he said. His voice was calm, almost serene. "But the mask, it doesn't care about what we want. It only cares about what we are. And it will find another. It always does." The recording ended with a faint, almost imperceptible sound. A low, resonant hum, like the vibration of a distant heartbeat. There are many stories like this in the cold, uncharted void of space, of artifacts left behind by civilizations far older than ours. Some are treasures, others are warnings. But if you ever find yourself on a distant world and you uncover something ancient, something that hums with a life of its own, leave it. Don't touch it. Don't even look at it. Because some truths aren't just uncomfortable. They're predatory. They're waiting. And they will know you.